Starting with a new chapter, chapter 20, that is locomotion and movement. Now, this locomotion and movement is an elaborate chapter that deals with the structure of the muscles, the movements which are brought about by the muscles, and the skeletal system of the body. But since this year the syllabus has been reduced, we will be talking about only the topics which are required. So we start with the skeletal muscles. First, let us introduce ourselves to why and how the muscles are important for us. Now, when we talk of organisms, around 40% to 50% of body weight of an organism is muscles, is equal to muscles. So we find that body weight is mainly due to the weight of the muscles, and these muscles are very important because they bring about various kinds of movement by the organism. Now, the properties which are shown by the muscles is excitability. That means they get excited on receiving certain kinds of stimulus. Another property which is shown by them is contractibility. They have the power to contract and bring about the movement. Also, they can get extension. So they get extended. They show the property of extension. And the another important property which is very important is elasticity. So we see that these are the various properties which are shown by the muscles, and these properties help in bringing about the movement in the organism. Now, when we classify the muscles, we have classified the muscles on the basis of their location. That is skeletal muscles, which are normally attached to the skeleton, the visceral, that is which are associated with inside the body, and the cardiac muscle, which are totally heart muscles. So we find different kinds of muscles over here in our body, and together these muscles bring about a coordinated activity of an organism. Now, in this particular video, we'll be talking about the skeletal muscles. Now, these skeletal muscles are very important. They are performing very important function, and the most important function which is performed by the skeletal muscle is to bring the movement, to bring about the movement in organisms. So they bring about the movement of the organism, and they are found associated with the skeleton. So we call them as skeletal muscle, as they are attached to skeleton. So they provide the framework. Also, these are called as striated muscles. So another term for them is also or striated muscles. We call them as striated muscles because they show striations. They show striations, that is light and dark band. Now, these muscles have another name which is known as voluntary muscles. So we find these muscles have three different names because of their properties. Why voluntary muscles? Because they are under the control of our will. That means if we want to move, for example, I want to move my hand is moving because I want it to. So it will fall under the voluntary muscle, striated muscles as they have striation, and the skeletal muscle. So these are the various names of the skeletal muscles. Striations means when we see the structure, these muscles have structure like this and they will be showing light and the dark band. So this is the dark band and this region is the light band. So we will find prominent striations in them. Now let us study in detail about the structure of these striated muscles or the skeletal muscles. So when we see or when we study the skeletal muscles, we will be talking about in two different aspects, that is studying the internal anatomy, that is the structure, internal anatomy or the structure of these muscles, and also we will look deep into the mechanism of working. So we will start first with the internal anatomy. We find over here these two, under these two heads, we will be studying the skeletal muscle. Now first let us begin with the internal anatomy. Let us try and understand how and why these muscles are able to perform various kinds of movements. Internal anatomy. Now, the muscles, each skeletal muscle or a group of skeletal muscle in our body is made up of number of muscle bundles. So, and these are known as fascicles. I'll show you with the help of a diagram to make you understand better. Now you know these muscles are attached to the bone. This is the bone. This is the tendon. And over here we have the muscle bundle. Now these are the muscles, and if we see the structure, they are having several muscle bundles over here. And each muscle bundle again this outer lining is known as fascicle, and it is the muscle bundle. This is the tendon, and when we just take out this to study better, this is muscle fiber. And this is sarcolemma. Now, when we study these muscle, each that bundle, the group of muscles in our body is made up of number of muscle bundles. So each of it is, this is a muscle bundle. Fascicle we know call it as muscle bundle. So what you see over here, each circle, it is a muscle bundle and it is known as fascicle. Then these are actually, these fascicles or this muscle bundle is held together by a common connective tissue layer which is made up of collagen, and this layer is known as fascia. So the collagen connective tissue layer which is mainly made up of collagen, we call it this layer as fascia, and this layer keeps the bundles together. Now, each of this fascicle, because this is the structure, that is each bundle, this is fascicle, and inside you can see several dots, and each of this dot, circle, smaller circle, is a muscle fiber. Now, each fascicle therefore has, as you can see over here, has several muscle fiber. Now, it is approximated that a fascicle, that means a fascicle muscle bundle, can have up to 10, 200 or more muscle fiber. So, this will constitute what? Fascicle. Muscle bundle. This will be muscle bundle or fascicle. So, there are several muscle fibers within a fascicle. Now, each muscle fiber, when we further study about the muscle fiber now, each muscle fiber, or we call it as myocyte, we also call it as muscle cell. These are the different names, so we can refer it to. So these are actually lined by plasma membrane, and the plasma membrane, each of the muscle fiber, when we remove it, each of the muscle fiber is lined by a plasma membrane, and over here we call it as sarcolemma. Now this sarcolemma is named so because it is lining the muscle fiber, and inside it has sarcoplasma. So inside the sarcolemma, that means the plasma membrane, we have the sarcoplasma, and this sarcoplasma is comparable to cytoplasm of a normal cell, but it has several other modifications. That is, sarcoplasma has several nuclei. So it will be having several nuclei, that is, it is multinucleated to provide more energy, and we call this condition as syncytium. We call this condition as syncytium, where the cell is having multiple nuclei but they are not separated. Also, it has large number of glycosomes. Now, these glycosomes actually store the glycogen, which provides energy during the muscle movement. Now, another important thing is the endoplasmic reticulum, which is present over here, is known as sarcoplasmic reticulum. So, sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is present in this sarcoplasma, is a storehouse for calcium ions. So this plasmic reticulum stores calcium ions, and these calcium ions play an important role in the membrane potential. There is a shift in the membrane potential, and which is very, very important for the muscle contraction. Also, the skeletal muscle fibers, these fibers are actually arranged parallel to each other and parallelly to the within the sarcoplasma. So these muscle fibers have parallelly arranged filaments within the sarcoplasma. So the muscle fibers have several myofibrils. They contain myofibrils, and these myofibrils are made up of with different kinds of proteins. That means two types of proteins which are arranged parallel to each other and also to the longitudinal axis of the muscle fibers. These Myofibrils are also known as myofilaments. Now, when we talk of the structure of the myofibrils, myofibrils will form the muscle fiber. Now, when we study the myofibrils, these myofibril has light and dark bands, and therefore these muscles appear straightened because of the light and dark bands which are alternate. And these light and dark bands are by formed by contractile proteins. And what are these contractile proteins? One is actin and the other is myosin. These two are very important contractile proteins which actually play an important role in bringing about the movement or the contraction of the skeletal muscles. So these light and dark bands will eventually give the straightened appearance. Now when we say the actin and myosin, actin are actually, they are light bands. That means they have light, they give light color. These are the light bands. They will form the dark bands. So the myosin have the dark bands made up of protein actin, made up of protein which is called actin, and it is made up of protein myosin. Also, when we see the actin and myosin, these are thin filaments. And whereas when we talk of the myosin, these are thick filaments. This we are talking of the proteins. And they are also called I bands, that is isotropic. And these are called A bands or anisotropic. So we have the different bands giving the color. Now both the proteins actin and myosin are arranged alternatively. So if we see actin followed by myosin, then actin, then myosin, they are arranged alternatively, and they are arranged alternatively also parallel to the longitudinal axis. So if we see the muscle fiber is like this, they will be arranged parallel to the longitudinal axis of the myofibrils. Now when we study or when we see the arrangement, the structure, internal structure of these arrangement of this fiber, this proteins, we find definite structures which are formed by these. These are the thick bands. This I am drawing to show you the arrangement of the muscle fibers, the proteins in the muscle fibers. This is the H zone. This is Z line. Then these are actually having, the thick fibers have M line. Then the thick filaments which you see over here are A bands, that is made up of myosin, and this blue thin ones are the I band, that is made up of actin, and this one Z to other Z, because this will continue over here also. So over here, from one Z line to another, this is sarcomere. Now, if we see to the arrangement of these, the thin filaments on one side are firmly attached to the Z line. So over here, when we see this Z line is having arrangement as such in which it provides attachment to the thin line. So we see all the fibers I band are attached to this Z line. Now this thick filaments which are present in the center, which forms the A band, have the M line attached, which provides support to these fibers as well, this proteins as well. Now, the A and I bands are arranged alternatively throughout the length of the myofibrils. The myofibril is running like this, and the arrangement is alternate throughout the myofibrils. And also, the portion between the two thin bands is known as the H zone. It is the area, it provides area for the contraction of the thin filaments to bring about the contraction movement. We will study further. We'll be able to understand this here. This we are understanding the arrangement. Now the portion of the myofibril which has from one Z line, that is this Z line to this Z line, forms the sarcomere, and this sarcomere is actually the functional unit of the contraction. That means it is the main area where the contraction will be taking place over here, and this Z zone is the space between which helps in bringing about the contraction. And over here, when the muscle is in the resting stage, normally the edges of the thin filament partially overlap. Over here you can see they will overlap partially the thick filament, not completely, but they are overlapping almost half, that is partially the region, leaving the thick central part empty, and this is the space for enabling or bringing about the contraction. This is known as the edge zone, and it is not overlapped by the thin filament. So this is the structure of the muscle. So when we see when we summarize it, we find that each muscle is made up of several muscle bundle. So when we study this, in a nutshell, if we talk about, each muscle is made up of muscle bundles, several muscle bundles, and these muscle bundles or fascicles are within that. Each muscle bundle is made up of several fibers or muscle fibers, or we call them as uh, myofibrils, and these are further made up of filaments which are known as myofibrils. Myofibrils are further made up of actin and myosin. And this actin and myosin forms the sarcomere, which actually is the site or the functional unit to bring about the contraction.